Tim Schafer, Paul Levering, welcome to the Informer Show, guys.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it is beyond an honor to have you both. I am completely in love with very few things in my life. I'd say it's like maybe like the British version of The Office, chocolate chip banana bread, and the Double Fine Adventure documentary. It is the holy Bible for video game documentaries. If you have not seen it, you need to go out and watch it. And so I'm excited to have you two on to talk about the Blu-ray release.
That's so awesome. And that was the original pitch document. It was like comparable projects, banana, chocolate bread.
Chocolate banana bread.
Uh-huh. Yeah, the British version of The Office. We want to do a thing like that, but it's about you making an adventure game.
Perfect. So the Blu-ray's coming out in November at some point or before the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay, but technically...
Guarantee. Paul's the producer of this whole endeavor.
And that's just...
And the box, really. Yep.
That's
producers know about schedules.
That's right. But
Yeah.
you can see this documentary right now in 720p on YouTube. So really, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, you can just go on Double Fine's YouTube channel, right? That's where it's posted?
Yeah, you can go watch it. But this version is slicker and nicer.
Oh, yeah.
And
the one that's coming out for Blu-ray has been completely retooled. So it's like an HD remaster.
Okay, it's got bonus clips in there, a bunch of fun stuff, including a clip of this podcast, which is very surreal. Thanks for including that.
Yeah.
It's like a cream of wheat box. If you look at it, you'll see this podcast, and then in the podcast you'll see the book. But if Paul wasn't here, I would tell you about what a bunch of video nerds these guys are who are making the two-player production guys. They are in there frame by frame, looking at like histograms. You know histograms, or is that when you?
Close enough.
All right, histographs. Doing all this crazy color correction. And Scott was like, look, we move this and this and this and see how the shot's totally different. I'm like, I don't see it. And then they turn it off. And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, Peter Chan is hideous. What have you done?
Turn me into a zombie. It's like it makes everyone on the documentary actually look like human beings again, which is great.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that was a problem before. So color corrected everything and unblurred everything. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more NSFW stuff in there.
That's true. Still a couple things were blurred, which is very mysterious. Towards the beginning and end, I'm like, what the hell are they possibly blurring out with this?
Especially like Tim's death lists and sort of thing.
Oh, have you seen the final?
Yeah, I watched the Blu-ray one, yeah.
The whole thing, oh, awesome.
I went through it again and again. Hey, you know what? It's still really, really good, you guys. So, also, a touch I love, just because I'm in love with the Brutal Legend menu. I love that the Blu-ray menu is kind of harkened back to that live-action menu interactive format. Was that an intentional homage to Brutal Legend, or is that just a cool thing to do?
It's a cool menu idea.
I mean, I love that menu, and I think I really like the idea. I think it's also influenced by the Simpsons menus on some of the Simpsons DVDs.
Okay.
Like some of the later ones, initially they were a terrible mess. And they have so many seasons, it was interesting to see them evolve over time. And they kind of settled into this place where it was like a living menu, almost like a still shot where things would just kind of happen in the background.
Right on.
So that's what I wanted us to do.
Yeah, it looks good.
This little picture of the office, it was like a slice of time.
Well, just to take a step back from the Blu-ray menus. So this entire effort, your guys' collaboration between Double Fine and Two Player Productions, I would argue it's the biggest push for transparency in the history of the video game industry. And so...
You have another one.
If you have another one...
Yeah, that was it. We did it. Yeah, high five. Yeah!
Why did you guys do this? How did this whole thing come about?
All the time. Why did we do that? You talk first. It's your idea.
Well, we never expected it to be so big. So it seemed like a safe thing at the time. It would just be a little doc that would take a couple of months. And we weren't expecting to do anything that was sort of unprecedented. But it sort of grew into that when all that money came in.
And the game took longer.
Well, yeah.
So
weren't expecting that.
It became a bigger budget.
And so
more interesting, right?
Oh,
more interesting to.
And so as the budget kind of inflated because so many people donated, then also the video budget inflated and you realized you need to make this more than just... Was it always going to be episodic like that?
At the time, I think that we wanted it to be like a living doc. Like you would sort of get to... We wanted to do the monthly updates. So we knew it was going to be like a series, but we just had no idea it was going to run on for as long and that the development was going to be so interesting.
Fraught with peril.
Did you have discussions with the rest of Two Player then about like, do we stick around for this full saga when you start to see how far away that horizon line is?
Oh, we had to. I mean, I think that since we sort of pitched it as this combined effort of a doc and a game, we couldn't be like, oh, well, we're just going to do like half of it or a quarter of it. Like, we knew that we had to be there for the entire thing. And just with it getting as big, it made us want to focus on it even more. So instead of stepping back, it's like, well, let's just lean into it even harder.
Were you even planning to move down here?
No.
Because they lived in Portland when we started, and then they slowly just started spending more and more time here, and then all of a sudden they're here.
Yeah.
San Franciscans.
Yeah, we were normally how we would do things is we'd come to visit a studio for a couple of days, and maybe like once a month, and that's what we initially planned the project to be. And then after this happened, like I came down, and then Paul Nasso followed me a little while after, and we just started shooting in the office every single day.
So Tim, why were you open to this idea? What was their pitch, and why'd you say yes?
I met these guys when they interviewed me for the Minecraft documentary, Mojang Story of Minecraft, or Minecraft Story of Mojang.
Interchangeable.
Yes, either one. Yeah. If you watch upside down, it changes.
Someone actually released another documentary called Minecraft: The Story of Minecraft.
Wow, that's like Anvil: The Story of Anvil. Is that what they're referencing?
Yeah, maybe.
So I knew these guys, and we had a good time during the interview, and I thought it was a great idea because I'd always wanted to kind of pull it back the curtain and let people see what game development is like. When I was a kid, I loved video games, and I wondered how they were made. And I wrote a letter to Analog Magazine, the Atari 800 support magazine, and I was like, how do you work? How do you get a job making video games? Like, how does someone do that? And they never wrote back, and so sad. And because I think there's a lot of, you play games and you just imagine they're so complicated, because they are really, really complicated. And you're like, how could these ever be put together? They must be made by people smarter than me, scientists and robots and aliens, and then you get into the industry and like, they're not. They're just made by regular people solving one problem after another, And so I was interested in showing that. I want the world to see that. So that games are made by people like them, so people could feel like I could make games for a living. And then I also wanted to show how hard games are to make, so to show how easy, or at least how possible they are to make, but then also show not maybe how hard they are to make, but just how much the people who make games care about them, how much they put into them. Because I know that our team always just gives it everything they got and really like cares about every moment the player is going to have when they play the game. And I wanted the world to see that too, because I think it just helps your enjoyment of a game when you play it and it's made by people who are really passionate about it and care about it. And also I need a lot of attention to be happy. I just don't need people constantly looking at me and talking about me. So thanks for doing this podcast on the deal.
Yeah, it's really my pleasure. So what did you think about the state of video game documentaries at the time? Because was it 2011, 2012 when you guys are pitching this?
Yeah, well, there'd never been anything this big before. And like I said, I didn't think it would get to be as big as it did. But we had done a handful of projects. We'd done some stuff with Sony. We'd done the Minecraft doc. We'd done work with Penny Arcade. And something that we really wanted to do was just sort of cover a game from beginning to end. Because normally we would sort of get hired to come on near the end of a project and just be there for a couple of days. And we really wanted to be thorough and just get the whole thing. So that's when we were sort of pitching the idea to Double Fine. Let's just focus on a small project where we can get the entire thing. No publishers are involved, so nobody can tell us what we can or can't show. And just, it felt like a pretty safe bet for a studio of this size. Because like a really big studio is going to have someone who's going to be wanting to meddle in it, and then an indie studio, it's kind of a different experience. Whereas Double Fine's like this middle-sized studio where you still have that big experience of having a lot of employees, but they're independent. So it feels like the right place to be for something like this.
So how do you pitch that to your employees, Tim? Do you sit them down and say, hey, you're about to be on camera nonstop, and we're going to show your toughest moments in this game's development?
I mean, if anything is a regret on the project or what I would do differently, it was I kind of decided on my own that it was a good idea. Like, let's just do it. And then later the team was like, what? We're doing what? And part of that was because at the beginning it wasn't going to be such a big team. It was just going to be like me and Nathan Stapley, the artist, and we were going to make something small. And so I didn't really feel like I had to get a lot of permission from people because it was just going to be us. And then the team got bigger, and the team had a rough time with it too, because people could on the forums call them out by name, be like, I don't like so-and-so's animation, just name them. And it could potentially have exposed them to a lot of personal harassment on Twitter and stuff like that. So we let people, if they really just don't want to be part of it, opt out. There's certain team members are just like, I don't want to be in it, and we respect that and don't film in that. And we try to mention it in job interviews and stuff now. By the way, that these cameras here, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. But I also try and impart on them that vision of like, it's good. It's good for the art form. It's good for the industry. I think it's good for the players to to open the curtain and let everybody see how games are made.
How often? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Sort of observing like the internet negativity that would take place. I think a lot of it was still extremely generalized. It was very rare that I saw anyone being specifically focused in on, like a staff member of Double Fine. When people had complaints, they would usually be complaining about the game as a whole. But when people had positive things to say, they were often really likely to call out certain team members, which was something that was like one of my core goals for the documentary, was to get people to understand who the people are behind the games.
Not just me.
Not just him.
Yeah, unfortunately. But a lot of people, they would champion, like there's people who just, there's some people on the forums who seem to hate me and everyone on the team, but they love Ray. Like, Ray, he's our hero.
He's got good sympathetic eyes, you know?
Yeah. And people, different people, I think, root for different people on the team.
Early on, we would have like certain team members would jump into the forums and do big, long posts to the backers about how their workflow goes or how they're doing certain things. So you'd get these long things about art or programming. And I think it was interesting to see people who aren't normally exposed to that type of thing being able to have some sort of access to it firsthand.
Yeah,
so it wasn't just like the programming fans. It would be people who were like, oh, this is my first time learning about game development, who would be in there.
How often did you kind of butt up against that edge of, we can't show this? Like, there's a couple times in the documentary, like, whatever happened to the voice actors surrounding Vela, that's all very mysterious in the documentary about what exactly is going on there. Were there even more situations like that where it's like, we just have to cut out this entire week? Or another good example is there's a brutal period towards the end of the documentary when you went through the layoffs. And that's all, interestingly, kind of past tense discussion of this was the toughest week in a long, long time. Or I think some people say just ever in their lives. Was that a conscious decision of like, we got to turn the cameras off for these certain moments?
Well, we talk about that in the commentary. And like a day like that, it was just kind of like, you guys have to come into this meeting. And we're like, oh, get the cameras. Like, we're going to shoot this. And they're like, no, like, don't shoot this meeting.
And that stuff, like, you're making a documentary. I imagine that would be, in some ways, that's the most important meeting in the film, because that's where the story, that's the, oh my God, what an important moment. And of course, it would have been incredibly bad taste, I think, to be filming people while they're being told that's not fair. Like, that's too much to ask. And it's just, I mean, we didn't shy away from it in the documentary, though. We talked about it, but we can't show something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like we actually showed way more than we probably should have. I don't know. Like, there's like a lot of stuff is in there that is the type of stuff that would usually cause problems for us in the media, and there'd be like headline worthy things would come out of that, and we would opt to show it anyway.
So that's what I'm curious about. When you say we, I mean, are you screening all these episodes, Tim, and saying, could you cut that part out? This is going to cause a firestorm.
We look at them. I care about certain things a lot. One is spoilers for the game. Like, I really wanted to make sure that the design wasn't spoiled, because that game had a big twist in the middle that is like, if it's the tiniest hint of that got out, it would ruin the enjoyment of it, I think, for a lot of people. And personnel discussions, like, we couldn't really film talking about if a certain employee was working out or performing well. Like, that didn't seem to be appropriate or fair to an employee, right? Mm-hmm. It could be really juicy and fun, obviously. Certain people talking about them behind their backs, but not fair. The only other thing is, like, if we had accidentally talked about someone, like, we want to be really open about us and be open and honest about the warts and all approach to Double Fine. Not that there's no warts. We don't have any warts, but when it comes to external partners, it's a little dicey or talking negative things about them, and including publishing partners or whoever. So if people said critical things about someone outside the company, we tend to be a little more careful about that. And we would show the episodes to the employees before they went up. And
there were never any changes that resulted from that, though. It was just more that people knew what was coming so that they wouldn't get blindsided by it.
So, there's, nothing outrageous, but there's just interesting little moments, like in the kickoff for Act 2, you guys go back to Red's and go out drinking again, and there's just like a nice shot of Tim looking depressed at a bar, drinking booze. I mean, when you're that exact class, when you see that, Tim, is it bizarre? Do you think, I don't want people to think that I'm just sad? And you even talk about that in the next episode. Like, everyone was talking about how we're so bummed out in the forums and whatnot. Do you worry about that aspect of it?
Am I euphoric about what?
Do you worry about just kind of conveying accurate morale levels, or is there something kind of, I don't know, satisfying about showing that, sometimes everyone goes out to the bar and just doesn't have a crazy time?
I mean, yeah, the process of doing this documentary is just a lot of it is the process of learning to let go of everything about, like when you take a bunch of selfies in a bar and they look at them, okay, that one, that's the good one, like because you delete everything else, you know what I mean? And being in this documentary, you can't worry about how you come off because you wouldn't be able to have anything. And like just personal appearance, I like gain and lose weight in that documentary so much, and I just like every shot, I'm like, oh god, look how gross that is, and I just had to kind of like let go of that, like just show it. Okay, I don't just show it. You know what I mean? It's very liberating to be like just show it all. I mean, I never took my shirt off. That'd be something to say for the
There's
sequel.
something
something to say for.
I had a plan for something like that, but
I mean, I felt like just showing everything, except for those exceptions that I mentioned, and I didn't know they were filming me at that moment in the bar, or I would have, of course, put on my happy clown face. But I don't think that was a sad night. Like I think it was a happy night, but I think it did capture how shipping a game is hard these days. It's really just this mix of a bunch of punches and just happy things, coming your way because you just see some super mean review and then some super happy streamer and then, just all these things coming at you. Someone tells you that game, oh, I love that game. Someone tells you I hate the game, and either the sales are good or bad or like it's all in all, it's a roller coaster and it's a rough ride. And unless there are very few games become these runaway hits at launch. And so for the most part, it can be kind of anticlimactic, I think, for almost all indie developers. Like, I see a lot of indie developers who are like, I'm putting everything, this is my first game, I'm putting everything into it, it's going to change my life, it's going to be a huge hit. And it's tough because it's rare that they have a huge hit with their first game, and you have to look at it at the long haul, like creating a catalog of games that will sell slowly over time. Like that's what Double Fine has done, and that's what's kept us afloat. We have a back catalog now of a lot of different games, and not really like betting the farm on any one launch, And so that launch was we showed how it felt. Like it was like a very mix of different emotions.
I'm sort of feeling that myself now as the Blu-ray is nearing completion because
people are gonna love that.
This is the longest I've ever worked. This is like 5 years on this project, from when it started with me talking to Tim to this Blu-ray coming out. And we've made pushes for the doc series a couple of different times before, and this is like our last final big push for it. And I really hope that we can get it out there in some way.
Yeah.
But it feels weird for it to be sort of done. And I'm not sure how I feel about it just yet.
Yeah, I always talk about post-project depression because if you wait, Psychonauts took 5 years. You're like, I am the Psychonauts guy. Like that's who I am. And then it's over. It's like, wait, I shipped it. I'm not the Psychonauts guy anymore. Who am I? So there it is. Look how beautiful.
Perfect. We're just listening to the audio version. He's holding a pristine Blu-ray edition up there to the camera. It's very nice.
This is a big cardboard box.
Yeah, this is the backer edition. So this is the big box.
So after 5 years of working on this thing, Paul, where do you rank it in terms of how proud you are of it?
Oh, I'm definitely proudest. Like, I don't know if I'll ever get to do anything of this scale again. It's insane.
Yeah. Tim, do you consider it a personal project of yours? Can you possibly compare it to how proud you are of a game once you finish it? Do you feel that invested in the doc?
I was like a participant with, I feel like, a shared overlapping visions of the thing. They had two-player definitely has their take on what they wanted to make, and I felt like a lot of that was similar to what I wanted to show. We were both, fighting for showing everything, the good and the bad, and I think that lined up really well. And so the documentary is not a personal project, but it's definitely a moment in time of Double Fine. And even watching the beginning of it now, there's people who aren't here anymore, and there's just feelings that we had at the time that are just so amazing to see for us. And I feel like, I hope that it's helpful or inspiring to people who make games or want to make games in the future. I think it's the best video game documentary ever made. I'll say that.
Well, there haven't been many made.
No, but it's definitely the
really
best.
Low.
Because it's not in the early days of when reality TV was exploding, we're like, they should do a reality TV show about making games. And I was like, no. There's going to be people sitting around looking at screens. It's going to be super boring. And I feel like documentary makes it not boring, but also doesn't sensationalize it. Like there's not a lot of, there's not a lot of the real world moments where you're sitting around having these tense conversations. They keep cutting to faces having expressions that aren't really there. They didn't manufacture a lot of drama.
We didn't have to manufacture. There was a lot of drama, and there was a lot of really weird, interesting things that happened. So any time where there's like a chance to take like a field trip or go someplace strange, like driving around in John Romero's car. Like, there's just a lot of weird stuff that came up.
And the mechanic lays out the perfect analogy for your situation.
Yeah. It's like, I was like, wow, this feels like actual television. This is amazing that this is happening.
So did you get to watch many of the deleted scenes or bonus features yet?
A couple here and there, yeah. Enjoyed the one where it was more footage of you reading the Game Informer article that Tim Turi wrote. And then I listened to your commentary track where you're talking about how funny it was when you listened to, I think, this podcast and hearing Tim talk about how surreal it was. Because obviously he admires your writing. And so I watched that episode with him and he was cringing at the idea of you reading off like his punny headlines in that magazine feature. Like, oh, Tim Schafer, I'm sure he's judging this writing right now.
I never thought about I thought about crossing the line between developers and players, but never that line about like journalists and there's a whole documentary being made about journalism and like what kind of discussions you guys have, because I'd probably be totally shocked to hear what you guys talk about over there. Like, yeah, it's obviously you just talk about sleeping with developers and exchange good reviews for exchange for money and sex, right?
Right, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, exactly.
That's what I assumed. So I'd probably be shocked if it wasn't that. It just shows what a wall there was, because I was so surprised watching the podcast where Tim said that it was like just thinking that he would think twice about that me walking around handing out his article. It's just like, wow, there are these divides that you don't realize are there between journalism and development, and you kind of know they're there, but that made it a lot clearer.
The doc ran on for so long, it created this really weird. I don't know if I've ever seen it happen in another doc before, in that people would come to the office looking to get hired. People were hired at the office who were watching the doc. Like, they watched the documentary and then they came to the office and got hired, and now they work here. And like the stuff with Tim, like Tim came to the office having watched the documentary and like sort of knew some people from watching like side quests and things like that. And then yeah, and it went on for so long that like it created this cycle of people moving in and out of the documentary.
So you guys are immersed in that for so long. You talk about capturing drama and not manufacturing any of it, but certainly people on the team must feel the pressure after you've been filming for 3 years when you're coming to the end of development. Like, are people brainstorming in meetings like, oh, this is probably a good moment to have the final speech, the rousing last hurrah? Do you think about that, or is it just so natural at this point with the cameras around that people don't frame their thoughts that way?
You do ignore them during the meeting. You forget that they're there. But when I'm going to make a big speech in front of the company, and I know it's going to be filmed, you're already kind of thinking about the whole company's going to be watching me, so I have to make this statement for the company.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it really changes things to have the camera there. And like when you're on stage, you're on stage.
I think the most aware people became of it is that after a meeting, someone would have like the light bulb and like, oh, that was probably really good for the doc, wasn't it? It's like, yeah.
That intense discussion probably worked out really well. So
there's some meetings that are crazy in the they're crazy for me to watch. The deleted scenes. There's 2 hours. I think 2 hour long brainstorming sessions for puzzles, which are 15 minutes. There's some long ones in there.
Two separate brainstorming, you and John, and then you and a bigger part of the team for Act 2. And it's almost like three hours.
Yeah, one of me and John, that's all the stuff that was cut. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see a whole bunch of stuff to get designed that was cut. And then the one with the team is stuff that was in Act 2 of the game. So it's a specific puzzle that you can play in the game, and you kind of watch it come together. And I found it fascinating to watch this brainstorming after having finished the completed product. And then go back and look and see how it's like, I didn't come up with that idea, but no one really, I always thought of it as so-and-so's puzzle. But really, if you listen to the conversation, different parts of the little string of light bulbs turn on at different points. And someone says knots, and someone says this visual thing, and it just is really watching something collaborate and this thing come together is really fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of stuff that got cut, this is a deep cut, and I have it in the back of my mind, but I don't know where it came from. Maybe talking to you. Didn't you guys film like an entire improv class that you brought the team to early on?
How'd that come up? I thought that was squashed.
Oh, I don't know how I must have heard that. It does exist, yeah.
For years, I'd heard about how improv comedy has a lot of things that actually are really helpful in brainstorming, like teaching people to say yes and instead of no, those kind of things, and just riffing off each other's thoughts. And it's true, I think. There are a lot of similarities with brainstorming, and just learning how not to be critical, but just running with other people's ideas. I think it is important in brainstorming. So we're like, we should take an improv comedy class. We should do that. We should and so the very initial team, back when Brandon was on it and Myas was here and
Lee, Anna,
and we brought everyone to Fort Mason and we took this improv comedy class and we had a lot of fun. We had tons of fun. We were laughing our heads off most of the time. And these guys were filming it. I'm like, and this is early on when the doc wasn't really set what the doc was going to be in my head yet. I in some ways probably was thinking more like reality television. There would be all these really dramatic set pieces and like trips and all these things, like not just me sitting in this chair talking a lot. but and I was like, this is going to be so great for the doc because they're going to see the process, creative process. And they're like, we're not going to use that. And I was like, what? You're not going to use that? And he's like, yeah, we're going to. Trust me, you don't want to see use that. And I think it either just felt too much like forced for the documentary, like let's create some entertaining to watch stuff, or also we were just embarrassing in our bad comedy, is what you're saying.
Well, a lot of people on the team were really embarrassed by it, and it was kind of like the improv for the team was a trust building exercise, and the documentary crew shooting that and then not using it was also a trust building exercise.
Okay.
Because it's sort of like people on the team who were deathly embarrassed by this thing. It's like, no, look, it's okay. We're not going to use it. So I think it made them feel better about our judgment and like how we sort of respect them as individuals in the doc.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny.
Well, even without the improv class, like I've watched this documentary so many times in a group, like this last time I marathoned it with a couple friends. It's amazing how funny it is. Like several good laugh out loud moments every episode. I feel like that's such a crucial part of documentaries that a lot of people don't get right. And granted, Tim, just ignore this. You have a great subject matter here. You know that Tim Schafer is going to make some great jokes along the way. How important was that to convey comedy through this documentary?
I think that like any fun workplace, or like most workplaces are fun, and you find ways to have fun with your coworkers, and that's just how people sort of get things done most of the time. So it's something that we've always wanted to have in our documentary material. Like it came with like Penny Arcade. There's some humor in the Minecraft doc. It's something that we always want to have in there.
For Sweden, especially.
Yeah. Well,
considering
as much as you can
it's
get
pretty
right
funny.
now. Yeah.
It's the biggest comedy of all time in Sweden.
But
I think it is a funny group.
It's not entirely just Tim. It's like everyone here is like really interesting, like fun people, and we have all these different personalities. And I mean, they're not characters; they're real people. But they kind of, I could sort of see these people being on a TV show. It's like they have their individual personalities. They're distinctive, like they stand out from one another. And it made for like a really fun cast of people to have be like the central components of this documentary.
Yeah, definitely. How important is it to you, Tim, to be comedic around the office, to make sure things are always jokey through meetings?
I think it's more like a compulsion, like almost probably a defense mechanism. It's probably an embarrassing thing I should talk to a psychiatrist about. But like just during the meeting right now, I was sitting on the couch. We were back there in the Psychonauts 2 meeting, and they were doing all the serious, and I would throw out jokes once in a while, and I'm like, what am I doing? Am I helping this meeting by throwing out these jokes, or do I just want everyone to laugh at my joke while they're having this meeting? So it's not something you think about and plan. But I guess I do value. I tend to like people who are, fun-loving, happy. I mean, it's just the group. I think at Double Fine is a funny group, and maybe that is something. I don't know if it's encouraged, but I definitely think it's not discouraged.
Did you learn anything about yourself and your management style watching the documentary? Did you take notes on your own behavior at all?
Style. Interesting. No. I learned how to touch my face a lot, which is something I'm trying to work on, like right now. Management style. What did I learn about management style from watching the documentary?
I remember you said that you didn't learn anything.
Well, that was more about we made a choice to double down and put our own money into the project instead of cutting the project in half. We put our own money into it, and it ran late, and people got mad at us. And I was like, I still think that was the right decision. I still believe the game. Imagine if the game was half as big, it would look ridiculous. Ridiculous. Yeah, and so that's what I didn't learn. That's an interesting thing about watching it. What I learned.
It's going to be interesting to see like people talk when you leave the room. Like there's one great moment in the documentary where you're talking to the audio team and give a couple things of like, oh, it'd be great to have this. And you walk out and they're like, just don't do it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Just ignore what Tim said.
Yeah, that guy doesn't work here anymore. Totally unrelated.
How do you feel like the documentary overall changed the game? Do you feel like it's a little bit of a quantum effect here?
I think that it felt like the feedback from the community had some sort of impact.
I mean, that, but I don't know if that would have happened because of the documentary.
Well, would we have been sharing the progress of the game without the documentary?
I mean, honestly, we probably would have cut more from the game if it wasn't for the documentary. I mean, the guy, his part of you makes you unwilling to go and it just being public about your development. Games usually are cut in half at some point, just to stay anywhere near the original schedule. And we did cut this game down a lot from the original design, but maybe we would have cut more.
I think we have some deleted scenes of you talking about the original story that had more of like the witch and the prince and stuff.
Oh yeah, the witch and the prince. Yeah, so we cut the witch and we cut the prince. But who knows? We probably would have just cut out. I don't know.
It felt like the doc and the game became so like entwined. It's hard to say what one would have been independent of the other.
Yeah.
I think that if we had not done the thing where we released the doc episodes during development and then just shot it and released everything at the end, that would have been different. It
would have made it more like a normal game development where just the hits a fan all the time in game development, and every game is it can be a big mess at a certain point, and the documentary just made it so we couldn't hide any of that stuff. It was like all those parts that you'd normally tuck under the covers and just hide, no one would see, and you get to come out and like, look, this is the game we always intended it to make, and this is the one people could see which parts were intended and which parts were out of our control, and so that was really interesting to go through.
Well, on the flip side of that, go ahead, Paul.
No, I mean, I had done enough work with other studios to know that stuff like that happens everywhere, and it's just that no one ever hears about it. Like the biggest, $100 million games run into huge problems and have setbacks and cut tons of material and are getting finished at the very last day of production. Like that stuff happens to everybody, but that's not the type of thing that publishers want to talk about. But I really think it humanizes the aspect of game development because it shows that these people are flawed and that they make mistakes, but they're also trying as hard as they possibly can to make the best thing that they can.
Yeah.
Which is how I think a lot of people can relate to that in their lives.
I'd imagine one of the downsides of being on the front lines of transparency like that with Double Fine is people will say, yeah, that's just how Double Fine makes games.
Yeah.
Just hits the fan for Double Fine. But I can't imagine with Uncharted 4 any shit was hitting anything.
Managing money.
Yeah,
that's what I learned from the internet reaction to the Double Fine documentary.
That portion of the messaging never really came through. And it said, I always wanted people to understand that it was like this everywhere, but people just seemed to think that Double Fine was the only studio that worked this way.
I mean, it'd be great to do the same documentary somewhere else. Not that I want you guys to leave, but it'd be, I think, because it happens everywhere, but also every developer is so different, and they have a different set of priorities, and they would handle problems in a different way. That would be an interesting comparison. You could sell a whole series of maybe 10 of these different developers. But you can outsource this. You guys can stay here.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So it's interesting because when you talk about the reaction towards the split, and the explosion that caused in the community and whatnot, you have a good moment in the documentary, Tim, where you're talking about I hope that doesn't lead to us being less transparent in the future. I hope that's not the conclusion from this. And then it seems like the conclusion at the end of the documentary, at least in the footage that's out there, is you saying I just want to kind of close ourselves off for a while.
I mean, that's more like just take a break in a way. Like we were so constantly exposed. It's like you just want to get out of the sun for a little while and heal up a little bit. But we know we're going to be transparent, with Psychonauts, and we might pace it differently. But I don't think we want to go and hide again.
We're still shooting as much as we ever did before. But we're still trying to figure out what sort of form the next type of this doc is going to take. And it was interesting to see how the doc affected the project before. So we are sort of curious to try it differently and maybe not show the hand completely until the very end. Or do something a little more traditional leading up to the game's release, but then still have this doc that dives really deep. Because it did have an effect on the team and everybody working here. And as a person, I would like them to not have to go through that again.
Interesting. So you feel like more of a traditional 2-hour documentary film might be the way to go for Psychonauts?
I think it's more than 2 hours.
I think it's more than 2 hours, yeah.
I think it's more about, you're talking about not having that feedback loop where people are working on the game, watching the documentary, working on the game, how that kind of modifies your behavior, and by not showing us the footage, except for little bits here and there, we're not having that happen. So in some ways it's more pure.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any. There's like reality TV shows where the people are on it are like, yeah, I'm on a reality TV show, and they're totally into it. But I can't think of an actual documentary project that sort of was airing its content as the subjects were still in it. Most of the time, people will never do that because generally you're going to show somebody in a bad light, and they're going to be angry at you, and then you have to go in and see them the next day and ask them to sit down and be in this meeting. And it changes things, and it makes things really weird.
Especially with like editing, like it's nice to be able to foreshadow the big beats that are going to be coming up later on, and you're just kind of flying blind episode by episode with that.
Yeah. I think that now the way that Paul Owens, who does like all the editing for the series and has it all up in his head, the process that he's approaching it with now, he's like, oh man, like I have all this stuff that I can pull from. So instead of thinking of each episode as like this month, he can reach back a couple of months and just sort of tie together these bigger threads. So it's changing his whole process, and I think it's going to make for a much more unique doc, at least.
Yeah. One of the more interesting things, and this is probably just because I'm a video editor, but watching the documentary, it's really interesting to me how the episodes as they go along get a little bit drier, get a little bit longer. And tell me if this is a stretch, but it feels like I can feel the video team falling more and more in love with the team and more in love with game development and realizing like, we can't cut this. This is interesting. Did you feel that along the way? Like, we can't cut anymore. Like, we can't make it a nice musical montage through these good bits.
Well, it's like we were always sort of like, we want it to be entertaining and we want it to be informative, but riding the line between those two things is super hard because if you go too informative, it gets really dry. And if you go too entertaining, it sort of loses its value as, its substance. So particularly when we're going into Act 2 and a lot of the same stuff was happening again, It's like, oh, they're starting Act 2 and it's they're doing all the same things over again. So we really struggled to try to find different angles to that stuff. And that's why, I think you'll find that sort of those late middle episodes are some of the weakest. Even at between us and 2-player, we sort of feel that way.
I liked them. But they were more infrequent, too, because a lot of the stuff was the same thing. So
and that was
longer in between each
that was another thing. We used to take more time between each episode because we were trying to find the best bits to throw everything in there. And, a lot of those episodes do have standout moments, but I feel like it's like, oh, we already covered, how they, rig up a model and stuff like that. So trying to keep things fresh for the entire run of the series. There's 20 episodes. It's a ton of content.
Yeah, definitely. So overall, when you guys go back and watch the documentary, I assume, Tim, at some point you went back and watched it, maybe even recently. What stands out to you? What are the big beats that are most interesting in retrospect?
Well, we made these guys watch it all for the commentary track.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Okay.
So Double Fine does a commentary track for the entire series. 2-player does a commentary track for the entire series.
What do you guys talk about in your commentary?
I try to talk about technical stuff. But
boring.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
No, I think that for people who are interested in the doc, there's a lot of people who watch. For a lot of people, the documentary is much more important than the game because that's the new thing. We've seen games before. Documentary is really, really new, and the documentary is what we pitched. The first thing we pitched, it was really a documentary project, and then the game was an afterthought, and then the game got really big. So I think some people will be much more interested in hearing 2-player talk about stuff. And it is weird to hear me. Sometimes I'm watching the commentary and I'm talking about stuff that's happening on screen. I'm probably saying the same words. I only have so many stories.
I don't know if do you remember that when we were initially talking about it, it was going to be like an Amnesia Fortnite type thing? Because that's what I liked about Double Fine was Amnesia Fortnite.
Oh, that we were going to do a quick little game jam?
Yeah. We thought about doing this thing where we would let backers pick from a few different game ideas. It's and whatever one of those won would be the one that the Kickstarter funded. And Tim suggested doing a point-and-click adventure game. And then we're just like, why would we bother doing any other thing? Because if you're going to put that on the table, that's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
Crazy. People are crazy.
And it was we didn't want to say oh, you should do a point-and-click. Because it seems insane to go to Tim Schafer and tell him to make a point-and-click graphic adventure game. But when he brought it up on his own, it was
people do it all the time.
Yeah.
So, watching the documentary, you get a real sense.
What stood out? I've been trying to think of what stood out. It's hard to think of one thing that stood out. A lot of it just have length of time. Just watching the earlier episodes, I forgot about that person was on the team because they left the company. They left wow, there was a whole there's a whole episode where I was like worried that I wouldn't get Brandon Dillon on the project because he's such a good programmer and I really wanted to get him, but he was wanted on another project. Remember that was my big thing, like the whole game's gonna be made or broken by getting Brandon on, and he didn't last till the end of the project. And so by the end of it, the whole team makeup was much more focused on other people. So they're just seeing the changes in the team over time really struck me.
A lot of people came on and off for short periods of time.
Mm-hmm. I think everyone in the company at some point passed through Broken Age.
Is there anything you regret not getting in there? Or when you look back and think about the history of making Broken Age, is it just 100% the doc at this point?
Improv comedy.
Oh, of course.
Right?
That brilliant gem.
That should have been in there. What did we miss? I mean, we filmed everything.
Are the documentary and your memory of the project becoming one? Like when you look back on Broken Age's development, are you just going to think of the doc now moving forward?
Well, I feel like with the Blu-ray coming out, it's like the game is on here. It's like I've always wanted these two things to sort of live together because I feel like they are two pieces of a whole. At least I like to think of it that way. And I think that if you play the game first and then watch the documentary, or watch the documentary and then play the game, it's like completely different experiences. Mm-hmm. And there were people who were backers who refused to watch the doc until after they played the game, and people that watched the doc. And it's like they all experienced it a different way. They would have context into all these decisions that were made differently. And I can't think of many ways to experience media that way.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, watching the documentary, you get such a sense of how brutal game development is, how, scope of the project will always balloon up, things unforeseen will come about. So I'm wondering, pulling the trigger for Psychonauts 2, how difficult was that decision, knowing that you're just coming off the tails of a project that was really tough to put together? At least, I mean, it's the only one I've really seen put together almost in full. Did it feel like this is a huge trigger to pull? We need to be really careful with this.
Interesting. I don't remember thinking about it that way. There's a very strong sense in my mind of wanting to make Psychonauts 2. I just was like, part of it maybe came from doing a graphic adventure again, or doing something about going through the process of Broken Age. It's like, where I really want to go right now? I really want to go to the land of Psychonauts, because that's because that's a transition I made before. I finished Grim Fandango and was like, I really want to make a platformer and kind of tell a story in a different feeling interaction set. Being able to run around and jump on things but still tell a story. So I felt like I think I had that same transitional urge again of like, oh man, adventure games, they're great, but they make me want to run around and jump.
I want to have fun with playtesting again, yeah. So you didn't feel like the Rhombus of Ruin, the VR game you guys are making, would get that out of your system? You needed the full package here?
I needed the full package, exactly. And, it was like, of course it has to be done well. It's like you don't have the option. I mean, but we never feel like we had the option to just poop out some bad game. So,
One of the last interviews we did with Tim for the Double Fine adventure, we knew what was going to be coming next, but we asked him, it's like, so what's next after this? And he's like, what, Psychonauts 2? And I really wish that we could have put that in the doc as like the Marvel movie, like end of the credits sort of scene.
Thor?
Yeah, like
Thor's hammer?
Just because that felt so like, but we had to wait for the timing of the campaign and everything like that.
Right.
But we knew it was coming up over the horizon, and we were excited about it too, because we get to continue the story of Double Fine, which is really like what the Double Fine adventure is. It's more, I think, about the studio than the actual games when it comes down to it at this point.
Yeah.
But, it's a 3D game. It's an older property. It feels like we won't be covering the same thing again. Like, it's not going to be like a sequel to Broken Age, So it's like this whole nother aspect of game development, because you can't get any further from Broken Age and Psychonauts.
Yeah, definitely. So this is a deep cut, but did you end up calling the code name for Psychonauts 2 Grasslands, which you mentioned in the documentary?
Yeah.
Do we?
Yeah. That's what I use on every document is Grasslands.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
I still call it Grasslands.
There we go.
I've always called it Grasslands. Because my old documents that I have from the end of Psychonauts 1 were like Grasslands.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're all titled that. So I just kept that going. But now the whole world knows about the code name, so it's not really that useful as far as keeping secrets.
Yeah.
No one really knows.
So is this level of transparency going to be part of Double Fine forever? There's an interesting moment in the documentary where you talk about how you can't let good talent go. You can't let Bagel leave. You can't let Scott Campbell leave. And did that then grow into your feelings towards two-player?
Well, they're still here. But we haven't done it on every project. Like Headlander, We didn't film them because Lee's so grumpy about it.
I wish we could have. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ask him?
I mean, it's just there's a publisher there, so.
Oh yeah, that's part of it.
But it's Adult Swim. They're cool, right?
With it, no publisher wants this kind of exposure. I don't think they want to control the message of it, and if you tell the story and development. I mean, we didn't ask them, but.
Well, what's your guys'
felt like it would be stretching us kind of thin.
Yeah, for sure. What's your guys' relationship now? Are you a separate company housed within Double Fine? Are you on the Double Fine payroll? How does this work?
A little bit of both, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so
Two Players still exists as a separate entity. We still do outside jobs if there's something that we really like that comes up.
But they're still embedded in the offices here.
Yeah. So as long as there's crowdfunding, there's going to be transparency. Is that the overall creed for Double Fine moving forward?
Well, I mean, anyone who crowdfunds needs to be transparent in a lot of ways because the backers want to know what's up. You can't just disappear and say, see you in 2 years. And, so I think that'll always be a part of it. For us, I'm still interested in being transparent. It's just as long as that story is interesting to people. Like if we just, as long as each development is as interesting to film as the last one. Like if it seems like, it's just filming the same stuff again.
Yeah, I don't ever want the story to become stale, and I don't think it would necessarily. Maybe if you were like cranking out like a football game year after year, that might get. There's still probably a story to be found there. Like I think it's a lot of the different angles in which you can approach something from. Mm-hmm. But like I was saying before, like the differences between Broken Age and Psychonauts 2 are like night and day. So there's this whole wealth of like technical difference that we can dive into. Going from totally different engines, and particularly with Unreal being relatively new to the people in the studio. It's like all these new problems. It's like interesting stuff.
Yeah, you guys roped in all of Molasses Flood, the development studio, to help out with Psychonauts 2, or what's that relationship?
They helped us out with some pre-production tests, and they made a explorable world and showed what the game could look like in Unreal. And that's in that video that we released. It looks really pretty.
Yeah.
They did... started with Raz's motion sets. So they helped us get a jump start because a lot of the team was still busy on the VR game and on Headlander. But now our team has rolled onto it, and so they're working on something else. But they were awesome to work with.
Yeah. So what's the current state of Psychonauts 2?
We are in pre-production still, designing brains for the game.
Right.
We have the story kind of figured out, and so now we're picking each brain and where it fits in there.
Okay, so post Art Jam, just for the Broken Age analogy, what episode would you be on in the Broken Age series?
It's so different because the way it's getting designed is the different.
Yeah, the structure is different.
We had an Art Jam already.
Okay.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. And we have something up playable, and what episode are we? Let me look at the episode directory. Let's see.
It's not one of them.
Okay, so still brainstorming, locking down the scale.
It would almost be like maybe 4 or 5.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's a good number.
Kind of like Cloud Colony, putting together Cloud Colony.
Yeah.
I would say.
So getting close to the point where Tim Turi comes out and checks it out. Is that right?
Possibly.
Even though he works for Capcom.
More like, do you start off with Maiden's
Is that when
Feast?
Tim Turi came out?
That was later on. It was more like Maiden's Feast because you started with Maiden's Feast,
okay.
and then yeah, more like Maiden's Feast then.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Gotcha. Sounds good.
Our Maiden's Feast.
Hey, Tim, I've always wanted to ask you about this story about Brutal Legends development.
Not true.
No, but about Activision proposing the idea of making it a Guitar Hero adventure game.
Oh, you're going to get me sued.
What can you say about that? How serious was it? Was it a pitch that you declined?
No.
There was concern in that group that if there was... Oh, God, what can I say without getting sued? I can't. People sued us, you understand.
I didn't know that.
Just this hand comes in from off screen. That's a real thing. I mean, it's a real thing. They're thinking about should we take on, when they merged with Vivendi and we take on each project, deciding which ones to keep and which ones to. They were concerned about this game is a lot like Guitar Hero in a way, and we're going to do this. It was kind of like, what would you think about making it part of that IP?
Yeah.
Kind of
Fair to say you didn't like that idea. You wanted to keep it original.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it becoming like Guitar Hero Adventures or something like that. Which we had worked so long on making it an individual thing that, and they never proposed that to me. That's the way I felt it was going, and that was all just a big mess. And luckily, that all worked out for the good. And EA came and saved us, and the game came out, and it's for October right now.
Hey,
7 years anniversary.
man. Holy cow, that's crazy. Is there a fan base out there that's clamoring for something in the Brutal Legend universe to be made?
Yeah, I get tweets about that as much as I do Psychonauts, but I don't want to make another sequel after this. That'd be too many sequels in a row. But I do play it every Rocktober. Rocktober 13th, that we just this year we play it with fans, play the multiplayer online with people. It's still fun to play.
There's like a community of people that still play the multiplayer and have perfected it to a ridiculous degree.
I can't beat them.
As with all old games.
That'd be fun to watch.
They just immediately destroy you the moment you log into a game with them.
Yeah. Speaking of October, a while ago you guys announced Costume Quest as a TV series. Is that still moving forward? Is that still somewhere?
Yeah. Still a thing.
Okay.
It's coming.
It's coming soonish?
Cartoons take a long time. Who figured? I was like, you guys don't have any, this is all just like a bunch of cutscenes. Why isn't this done? That's what I say. That's why they like working with me. But it's
cutscenes are real easy.
We're not working on it directly, but people we know and like are working on it.
Yeah.
We announced everyone that's working on it, right? Zach Gorman, who did the Costume Quest comic book, is doing the show. So it's gonna be good. It's still going.
Okay, good to hear. I'm curious.
This Halloween, though.
Okay, not quite this Halloween. I'm curious, Tim, your taste in gaming, how it's evolved, and how in line it is with the games that Double Fine makes. I know this is a broad question, but I'm always interested. Like, there's an interesting point in the documentary where you're talking about how long Broken Age should be, and Greg Rice, your producer, is in there saying, like, everyone always says games are too long. Let's just make it short. This is what we want. And you're like, no, I still feel like we need to do it this way. Whereas imagine playing games personally, you probably do prefer shorter games. I know you're a big fan of like Limbo and Inside. I'm curious, how aligned do you feel like your personal tastes are and Double Fine's output?
In some ways, that's part of the decision to make Psychonauts 2. Like Psychonauts in general is like one of those games I wish people would make for me. Like I really wish I want to play action-adventure games in a stylized world where there's a lot of humor and physical puzzles and a story being told. I just, I love Zelda and Mario 64, and I want those kind of games. So Psychonauts is exactly the kind of game I would like to play. I do love Limbo and Inside, and they were short. That's true. But I also love tucking into. I mean, for me, like a lot of like Okami was a really long game for me, but I just liked it. It was just there every night, and I would just play it. And I'm sure everyone has those games. Usually, it's like a Fallout game where they just just play it forever. And so I totally like long Final Fantasy VII and like long. That's one still my favorite, but like.
Well, why do you like 7? Actually, we've talked a lot about 7 on this podcast. We played all the way through it, but I'm curious, what stands out to you about Final Fantasy VII?
I just love the way it felt. Like like a lot of the other ones, I'm not as happy about the art style. I love stylized, more people might say cartoony graphics, but I just like that kind of take on it more than I like the more realistic looking guys with the boy band hair and the mesh shirts and stuff. Like my taste is more towards Cloud and that era.
Yeah, we just replayed it, and what stood out to me is just how, and even like in the expanded universe that Square has built up around Final Fantasy VII and the movie and other games and whatnot, they're all so serious. And that game is silly and comedic and weird. Red 13's dressing up as a sailor. Like, it is a weird, funny game, and I feel like Square doesn't acknowledge that ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know, it's a weird thing.
True. So I love those games. A lot of my favorite games are like kind of PS2 era Japanese games like Katamari and Okami. Oh, that was right. That's right. And Ico, or do you say Ico?
That's tough.
Yeah. Those are some of the games that made a really big impact. But then previously, obviously Mario 64 and Final Fantasy 7 are what inspired a lot of segments.
Anything this year that stands out for you? Do you have a favorite game this year?
Yeah. What? Let's see. I just got my PSVR. Playing a lot of Wayward Sky is really fun, and I like Inside. So yeah, someone was asking me the last time. I was talking about how important being surprised is in a game, but they're like, well, "When's the last time you were really, really surprised?" And I couldn't think of anything on the spot. It's like, because like, sometimes you go through these periods where like nothing, movies, TV, like nothing really ever surprises you. You can kind of predict the end of everything. But Inside, something happens in the middle of Inside that really took me by surprise. Even though people warned me, there's this weird part in Inside. I'm like, oh, wow, that is unexpected. What else have I been playing? I was playing Oxenfree and enjoying that. And it's kind of right now I'm actually replaying Costume Quest. It sounds like I'm selling Double Fine games, but my daughter's 8 and now she can read really well, and so it's fun to go through Costume Quest and play that for Halloween.
Oh, it's gonna be awesome. Paul, do you have time to play a lot of games when you're not editing the Psychonauts?
Actually, I buy way too many games and don't play them at all. Really, I like getting like tastes of things. I like just seeing what everybody's doing. But I've been playing Dragon Quest Builders a lot.
Oh,
I absolutely love that game.
It looks so good.
It's just like the perfect mix of Zelda and Minecraft, and it feels like it's all the gameplay that Minecraft was ever missing, with some direction. And like the Dragon Quest world is really fun and super lighthearted, so it's a nice change of pace from how like grimdark like everything is all the time.
Yeah.
It's really refreshing and
By
fun.
the way, on that note,
yeah, you might like it.
if you're looking for a project in the future, having a follow-up documentary to the Minecraft documentary would be fascinating. Picking up where you left off with Notch, you must think about it so much, right?
I feel, the Minecraft doc is like this really weird slice in time where it's almost like this, like someone playing a harp, and then it sort of like had gasoline on it and exploded, but we stopped shooting like when that happened. So it's like really weird stuff happened the moment we stopped making that documentary, and it's like, well, I guess that we missed that.
Were they think they were waiting for you guys to go away? So
I just think it was the timing of it. Like, it was just like we got this point and everything was really nice and happy, and that's the type of doc we made. We made a doc that's very inspirational and very happy, and it felt like as soon as we stopped shooting, all this really dark stuff happened, like depression and things being sold and people acting weird, and it was just like, wow, this is a completely different side of all this, and this is what we're not capturing.
But you're pretty upbeat in your documentaries. Is it nice just to capture that harp and move on?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I kind of like being that's the type of projects that we tend to work on, is that we want to inspire people instead of make them feel kind of like bummed out.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not really into that whole mudslinging style of documentary where it's like you go out for a takedown and you want to show somebody to be like this big jerk. Mm-hmm. It's like I just think that there's.
I should have asked that before I said yes.
Oh, well, it's funny how many people hire us without ever really knowing what we do.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, but I prefer for our stuff to inspire people, because I think like being outside the game industry and looking in, it's like that's what I wanted. Like I wanted to be inspired, and there really wasn't a lot of content out there that was inspiring. It was all very superficial, like when we started making doc stuff.
Well, if people watching or listening to this want to be inspired and watch the greatest game documentary ever made, either go on YouTube, or is it on like Double Fine site, 2-player site? Where can they find this Blu-ray?
It'll be on the Double Fine site.
Okay, so check it out at some point later this year, and I urge everyone to watch this. It is so unbelievably good. So hey, guys.
Great Christmas present.
Yeah.
No, it's so good.
Get it for Christmas.
I just want to thank you guys for the push for transparency. I think it's one of the most remarkable things to ever come out of the industry. I'm absolutely in love with it, and the documentary is amazing. So hats off to you guys. You did it.
Are you guys going to do your own documentary? It's your turn, journalism.
Oh, God, it's tough. We're a very small video team here at Game Informer.
That's true.
Yeah, we film a lot of stuff around other studios, but it would be great just to do a little slice here at Game Informer. So I would love to. I would love to find the time. So we'll see.
The meetings where you cry.
Oh my gosh, it's almost all of them. But again, thank you so much. And thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Game Informer Show. Be sure to tune in next week and we'll have a new episode waiting for you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.